Hey everybody, it's Bruce with Habowski Studio. Thanks for joining me for this plein air adventure. Today we're going to be doing a vertical 8x10. This scene right in here, I'm going to pick a subject composition right there. I want to thank you for joining me, and if you're not a subscriber, I invite you to subscribe. If you're new to the channel, thank you for checking it out. I invite you to watch others. Very cool content, and follow me on Facebook and like my page and all that good stuff at Habowski Studio. So let's get started.
Hey everybody, how's it going? So as you can see, I've changed the format. I've decided to go with the horizontal. And what I'm painting on is a canvas panel that I bought. Fredericks makes them. I bought them at a local art supply store. And the board itself is like a 16th inch thick with canvas mounted on it. And I've taken that board and mounted it onto a masonite panel to make sure it wasn't going to warp and all that sort of thing. I do like experimenting with working on canvas sort of texture along with panel, and lately I've actually been playing around a lot more with canvas. Reminds me of my earlier days when I did a lot on canvas. So it's a very nice surface, of course, to get that scumbling effect in paint that you can achieve. And usually I start with pretty much a straight umber sketch, but you can see me mixing in some bits of local color, just approximations of some general tones in the background. You can go either way. It really doesn't matter. It's going to be covered up later on in the painting process. But taking a little more time with making sure I get the angle of the road that I want in the composition to be correct, and have it kind of blow off the edge of the panel on the right hand side to give a sense like you're right there where I'm standing, to really achieve that sense of perspective and that sort of thing. Just using thin to paint, and I tried to capture, because of some comments on my channel about wanting to see me mixing paint. I'm trying to do the best I can at the moment with incorporating the image along with the paint that you see on the left there. So you can see how I reach for certain colors to mix them. The palette will be coming at the end, but I can go ahead and tell you it's titanium white on the left, ultramarine blue, Hansa yellow light, Napthol red, and burnt umber. The red and the yellow are new colors to me that I bought from Gamblin. Just trying out some new colors, have some fun. Now here I am going to be mixing in some shade value of the green and shadow. I'll be modeling that a little more later. It's really important for me to get some bits and pieces going on in darks and lights, and to have things relate to one another later on in a painting. Here I am just scumbling some light tone of layer for the trees that are on the right, and I'll cut around those here and there with paint later on, but it just gives me some approximation of a shape. Again, going through, you can do this whole piece right from the get-go like I normally do with my burnt umber, just do a whole value sketch, but I tend to try different things when I paint. So in this case, I'm just, when I feel like I need some dark shapes to work off of, I'll go ahead and knock in a average value of those darks to gauge against for some general light tones that I'm knocking in here with the yellow and blue, a little bit of white. Nothing special about the brushes, just some bristle brushes right now to get the paint in there. Pulling that same color where I can use it in other parts of the composition. Now you can see, just commit to some paint. You can see a little thick there. If I think it's too blue, or a little white. If I think it needs a little bit of, as you can see, I'm adding a little bit of yellow there. Just a hint of a tinge of green blue to the sky. If you think it's too much, you can just buff it out like I am here. Thought it got a little strong, so just take it off with a paper towel. No big deal. Recommitting to a new color tone. Trying to get that average value again to the sky, just to give me some working tones to work with to move along to other parts of the painting. And just, you saw me just a little bit cut around that scumbled tree in the foreground, and I'll define that even more later on. Now here I am getting in a base tone for the road. I mixed a little burnt umber, the Napthol red, and some white to give me a nice color for some warmth to the road. And you see a little bit of me pulling the colors in the bottom left there. Can't get all the palette in there, but just getting some general shapes in the road to show like the ruts and undulations in the road. And you can see in a palette how when I mix color, I mix one color next to another to facilitate dancing around and getting different colors in different areas rather than keep altering just to one color pile. So I have basically multiple color piles going on that I can dip into if needed. There's not a whole lot of paint at this point. Not looking for thick applications of paint right now. I want to basically get some parts are kind of stained, pretty much, not very thick at all. And I like to do that because then I can, as the painting progresses, I can see kind of a little snapshot that it's going to work or not. And if it's not, it's easy to adjust the lighter base layers, the stained kind of thing, and just wipe that out much easier than if it was thicker paint. So if you're not sure as you go along, that's one technique you can use. And you could use bigger brushes in certain parts of your painting, but I tend to not go too big because you want the brush strokes to be in relationship to the scale of your painting. I think if they're too big, it's just going to seem out of place. So things to be wary of. Getting some shadow edge on the side of the road there as the light's coming from the right. This is late afternoon. I love painting that time of day because you get some very long shadows. Now here I am kind of, as the painting's kind of coming along, I can sort of work on the sky now because the sky is not a major player. As you can see, it only takes up not even a third. Yeah, probably about close to a third of the painting. It's important, but not that important, so that's why I'm kind of just working on it now as opposed to not working on it before, because I wanted to get the more major player, the shapes of the field and the shadows and that sort of thing into play for some general values. Then I can judge the sky accordingly. And you can see I get some lighter tones in there to work that lighter part of the sky. I don't go too much with too many strokes. I come back and get more paint because you don't want it to sully the blue around it. Now they got a little bit of that going on. I'll come back in and work on the field, as you can see here. Getting some of that scrub grass that's along the roads, everywhere you go on back roads of country roads. Adds interest and defines, get some textures in there. Little strokes here and there just to cut up some shapes. And kind of like how it's shaping up here. Not too far along in the painting, and I can already tell it's going to be sort of an eye catcher in terms of really making you feel like the viewer is standing right there. Now, of course, this is just one way of working, and every subject's going to present itself differently on how you need to proceed, and that's only up to each individual artist, so they know how they work with their brush work and that sort of thing with different subjects. So it's important to try different methods of tackling a subject in terms of maybe using an umber sketch, or maybe you want to do very well-defined brush drawing of the subject first, like say if it's an architectural subject. So those are only you, each individual artist will know that for your working methods, but I try to offer different ways in my videos of how I might tackle things. There's always usually a go-to, like I said with the umber sketch, but sometimes I shake it up to see what else can be had for creating the subject. Here I am kind of with my angled dagger brush cutting in some tree trunks, getting some basic trunks in there and limbs and that sort of thing on the trees. Slowly building up each part here. Those dagger brushes are very handy. Very, you can manipulate them quite a bit and get different effects out of them. Now here I am, it's key, like when I knocked in the base tone of the shadow, now I'm defining even darker elements in the shadow and then with lighter tones. So just those three different value shifts, you'll get some real sense of dimension in your shadows. So that's something to really practice and do in your own paintings. See how there's air now in that shadow a little bit more. Of course, we'll be working on the road later, so don't worry about that. Looks a little dark right now, of course. Sometimes I'll go with a darker base than I need for a certain element and then work the lights into it. And sometimes I'll go for a mid value and then push the darks and lights. It depends. Working on the background trees, starting to pull them up a little bit in color tones. So I might pick up some color in the from the foreground trees to the background trees, so there's some connection there. Of course, you get a connection with the color tones anyway with the limited palette I'm using. And it really facilitates just mixing quick and making decisions and sticking with them when you use a limited palette, because you don't have a lot of choices. So I really urge you to experiment with that. Just working on a variety of shapes and colors in the edge of the road on the left there. Now here's where I'm going back into the roadway shadow, kind of trying to define some elements because the road is kind of raised up a bit in the middle. So trying to get that feel of the curve. Trying to mimic that with the way I apply the paint, the strokes that I use. Kind of tickling some edges with my brush there to soften a few here and there. Trying to avoid, of course, super hard lines and that sort of element. If you have any issues, of course, just buff it out with paper towel, like I'm doing there. Gain some variety within the shapes in the shadow. So now it's starting to come to life. You get some little sky reflection potentially and that sort of thing. A lot of fun working. This particular road, of course, has yielded 3 paintings, so I'm pretty happy with this location. Just getting in some even more lighter tones, give variety within that shadow. Now I'll start having some kind of rut tracks, I guess you'd call them, from cars over time. Just trying to create some perspective also while I'm doing this. See how kind of the ones on the left kind of curve towards you. Gives a nice sense of perspective. And just subtly playing in some shadows of those ruts in the sunlight there. A lot of fun. You could, as this of course sets up and dries, scumbling some lighter elements of bits of pebbles and that sort of thing. You can go on and on with this sort of subject, but I'm trying to keep it somewhat loose. Now getting some lighter tones in the road. dabbing here and there, and then other places taking the paint and applying it and putting a stroke and leaving it. Try to experiment with that also, because you can always add more individual strokes to nuance the shapes and such, but try for more moderate statement and brush strokes. Now I'm trying to get a little bit of the dappled sunlight coming through the leaves of the trees. Not going too crazy, just one element so it breaks up that shadow shape just a bit, because of course in reality you won't have just a dark mass, you'll have the light filtering through at different levels. Some will be bright, sort of brighter tones, and others will be more subdued, because some leaves and shadows are closer to the roadway than others. Something to be wary of. I'm going to try not to get caught up in too much detail in each element, because I want to have the painting progress evenly as I go along. And of course, you're a plein air painting, and if you get caught up too much in one area, you can be losing light in another and not realize it. And that's why I recommend kind of dancing around, knocking in the shapes as you go along, moving around the painting. Have it approach a finish altogether, rather than working on one element moving on to the next. That's just an opinion. Try different ways. Working on some edge control there. You see how I wiped that off on the paper towel? I didn't keep going back and forth, otherwise you're just going to get it too muddy. Now you can see that my palette has been cleaned off. I don't do that all the time. It depends on how much mixing I've been doing, so I did take the time to clean it up and start anew. Same colors, of course, that I'm using. Now I'm taking a palette knife and applying some textures to the trees on the right that are closest to the viewer to get a sense of texture, of course, and bring that closer to the viewer. And you'll see once I apply this paint that I manipulate it with the brush in a moment. I like to do that a lot, because 90% of the time you couldn't get this effect just trying to paint it with a brush. So having a combination of brush work and some palette knife work can be of interest in a painting, especially with the palette knife going over the canvas texture. It's a really nice effect to facilitate creating leaves and such on trees. See how that road shadow opened up quite a bit? It's coming out really nice there. Now I'm taking a brush and manipulating the paint that I previously applied with a palette knife. I don't dab around too much. Depends, like as the paint begins to mix with the layer underneath, because of the pressure I might be using, I'll move the brush around in areas where I want that lighter tone. So I'm kind of making use efficiently of my time while I'm painting outdoors, and using that lighter color in other areas where it's needed. Then I'll come back and get another color for another use. Really facilitates painting quickly while you're outdoors, because time is of the essence. And of course, being November now here in Maine, pretty soon I'll be doing more in-studio demos, so look forward to those. Just strengthening up some shadows of the kind of scrubby weeds and grass on the side of the road there. Just tickling the paint a few times here and there, and then I'll wipe off the paint, pick up more paint, that sort of thing. Starting to get some highlights in the trees in the background. Pull those out a little bit. So that'll help me judge other elements in the painting that may need more adjustment. It's a constant back and forth, really, You're really just when you're plein air painting, you're really painting just a series of moments that you're witnessing. And getting like everyone uses the word, but it's true, you're getting just the essence of the subject, that time of day. And it can be a real test in terms of accuracy in drawing, that sort of thing. If you think you're going to have a real tough time with the drawing part of a subject you want to tackle when you're outdoor painting, I suggest practice near your house so you can go back to the same site frequently. And what I would do is I'd go there and draw it, just spend one whole session drawing out the elements in the painting, and then come back the next day at that time that you want, which whatever it is, morning or night, morning, afternoon, whichever, and then putting in the color so you don't have to worry about the drawing at that stage. And that could help you out in terms of accomplishing a plein air painting that you're happy with. Eventually you'll get good at this and you can do both at the same time in one sitting. So those are some ideas you can try out. Just putting some touches on the trees on the left there. A little bit of color variations and texture and that sort of thing. You see in my palette how I'm kind of sort of have, I wouldn't call them strings, but I have subtle shifts of color going from left to right and right to left, so on. That helps because I don't have to, I can just dip into a pile as I need an adjustment. I don't have to recreate some color mixtures. Works out really well. Here I am putting in the hay bales that are in the field, making a decision where I want them. And of course you're going to have issues where I'm not putting in every single hay bale, of course, because they're all over the place and not necessarily artistically aligned aesthetically. So I pick and choose which ones I want. And to put them in the painting, try to design it. Working on that correct value of the hay bales so they don't seem like they're spots stuck onto the panel. I'd rather overcommit a little darker and make them lighter. I think it's easier to make a darker object lighter than vice versa. Putting in a little bit of shadows that I see. Now I'm just committing to the highlights. Picking a spot and planting. I don't noodle around. I can do that afterwards in terms of edges, the edge of the highlight, but I want it nice and crisp. And I will attempt next time I am out there trying to get more up close to the painting or have segments of the demo in super close-up so that you can see the paint strokes going down. I've heard some comments on that too. Trying to find a happy medium here when I shoot the videos. I'm working on it. And you see everything's coming to life. Putting little highlights on the trees. Little touches here and there, some more limb detail. It's pretty much at this stage I'm kind of looking at different parts of the painting, finding where I want to make adjustments to bring out certain other elements, because it's pretty much there. Now I just got to finesse it. There's only so many strokes you can get away with when you're applying paint over wet paint. So again, it goes back to a light touch. Just mix up some paint like you saw me previously putting highlights in the sunlight part of the road there. Now a few dark shadow elements and different discoloration parts in the roadway. Not trying to get too crazy, but have some interest in that road. here's where I'm committing to the power poles. Think where I want to put it and plant that stroke. I've mixed up a quantity of paint to do this, so I'm not using super thin paint. And you can see as I started to pull through the darker shadow of that tree behind it, it made it a little darker on the poles. So that's why I brought in some more of the light tone of the pole color and went back over it again, striking in another pole. And even if you get a little mix of your background color, that can be useful for having that last pole I put in go further back. Now it's just a matter of putting in little touches. Can't really see it in the video, but I'm putting in a little stop sign back there. Now the power lines. Power lines are tricky no matter how you cut it. I just try to keep a continuous stroke, and of course they're going to curve down a little bit in the middle because of the weight of the line. So it's obvious they aren't straight. And you can see that I was running out of power. I was keeping track of my power on my tablet device that I'm recording this, and I didn't get to putting the shadows in on the power pole, so I would do that in the studio in terms of the power poles on the road. So now we're going to go to the outro here, and I want to thank you for joining me, and until next time, bye.
Okay, everybody, I want to thank you for joining me today, and kind of like how it turned out. I'll do a little more layering for a little thicker paint. I did some in a few areas, but I want to improve on that, and just about an hour, so kind of liking it. I want to thank you for joining me. Until next time, see you later. Bye. Okay, here's the palette I used today. Titanium white, ultramarine blue, Hansa yellow light, Napthol red, and some burnt umber. Just turps to thin the paint if needed.